Okay, so welcome to story time. We are going to be talking about our collective human story. So every story has a theme. Our theme, our humanity story, our theme is the theme of need. Everything you say, do, think, reverts back to this theme of need. Now, this theme of need is broken up into two sub-themes. We have met needs and unmet needs. Okay, so we're either behaving from a place of trying to get a need met, or we're behaving or responding or reacting to life based off of prior unmet needs and conditioned responses to life. All right, so it's really important to understand that because that really shapes how your personal narrative unfolds. So in every story too, we have a crew of narrators. In our tale, the omniscient narrator, the all-knowing narrator is your higher self. And the other narrators in your tale have to do with the different phases of the psyche. So the different parts of you. This is called parts in IFS therapy. In Jungian therapy, these would be called archetypes. If we were to go back and check out Freud's theory, this would be the interface between superego, ego, and id, right? So these different parts of ourselves are our narrators. So they constitute our inner voice, essentially. They make sense of the world around us and what plot line is currently unfolding. So in our story, there are two sort of superpower sources when it comes to narration. So we have your OG narrator, that is your autonomic nervous system. So the original gangster narrator is your nervous system, and your nervous system makes sense of and translates your external environment to you through what's called neuroception, which is awareness without perception. So we get internal sensations as babies when we're hungry or when we need human connection or touch, right? These internal sensations, these cues from our nervous system help us to get our needs met. Okay, so our needs fall into two categories. So we have our survival needs, which are our needs for food, water, human connection, shelter, and then we have our ecstasy needs, which are our needs for a creative participation in our life, right? To feel alive while we are living. So our need for empathy, our need for creativity, our need for self-actualization or growth, our need for understanding, right? Like these would all be considered ecstasy needs from my perspective. So it's important to realize that our survival intelligence, the OG narrator of your autonomic nervous system, is really only resourced to meet your survival needs. This is the intelligence source that you are first acquainted with as a child. It's what you develop the greatest amount of trust in as you grow older. Now, in order to meet our ecstasy needs, we need another intelligence source. You need higher self. And now I want to relate back to Lisa Miller's research on the awakened brain because she perfectly illustrates the fact that, and I talked about this in prior videos, that higher self in essence, or this questing awareness, is able to dovetail our life story with the outside story of life. So again, we're able to access intelligence not only from inside ourselves, but also in the external world, or what I call creative intelligence in the surrounding life. So I think the easiest way to think about all of this is to imagine a beach scene. So in this beach scene, we have our lifeguard who sits on the lifeguard stand, and our lifeguard communicates to surfers and swimmers when the ocean waters are looking troubled, right? And when it's safe to go. Right? It's safe to swim, it's safe to continue on, right? And they do this via hand gestures, right? Like they'll wave you in. That's similar to our body sensations. So again, our autonomic nervous system communicates us not through perception necessarily, right? But through internal sensations, okay? And when we are under its influences, our mindsets can respond in kind. So it does impact the way that we think or the thoughts that we have and the beliefs that we hold in that moment. But the first way it communicates us is through sensations in the body. Now, as I mentioned to you before, survival intelligence is only resourced to accommodate our survival needs. It is not resourced to really provide us with feedback about our ecstasy needs, because our ecstasy needs require our co-creative participation with life itself. Meaning, like, there's another party, right, we have to consider, which is life, in order to get these needs met, and the resources that are available in life itself. It's not just about defending, protecting, and securing needs from an inside-out perspective. Okay, so in order to get those needs met, we need the surfer. So the pro surfer is out in the water and is a master at not only surviving the waves of life, right? Not only getting up on their surfboard and being able to ride these waves to safety, but also how to carve and cut into the waves to create beautiful designs and flow states, right, from the events or from life itself. Okay, so again, they are co-creating with life as well as surviving life. So getting survival needs met and ecstasy needs met. So your pro surfer is your higher self. So we've got your OG narrator on the lifeguard stand who's waving you in or telling you it's safe to go via sensations. The waving really signifies sensations in your body, right? And then you've got the pro surfer who is skilled at surfing the waves of life and accommodating both survival and ecstasy needs in one go. And then surrounding the surfer and the lifeguard are your novice surfers. Okay, so these are surfers that are out there either, like bodyboarding or maybe just swimming. And then you've got surfers on these foam boards, and those are for kind of, like beginners. I never graduated from a foam board. But anyway, so you've got these other parts of you. And I think it's important for people to understand this. And this is not akin to dissociative personality disorder, right? Where you have these different voices in your head. But we all have different parts of ourselves. As I referenced earlier, Carl Jung referred to these as our archetypes. So these are collected intelligence that become personified within us, and in IFS, they're called parts. So it's why you may feel conflicted about a decision you need to make, right? Like there may be a part of you that feels like it's a good choice, another part of you that doesn't feel like it's a good choice. So these archetypes, I like to compare them to faces on a prism. So you have, in this case, the sun. And let's say sun is creative intelligence. You then have the rays of light coming from the sun. Those would be akin to really higher self. It's both connected to the sun and also an individualized expression of it. Okay, and the sun then shines through the faces of the prism. So these are all of the different parts of you, the different parts of your psyche. So the mother archetype or the helper archetype or the comedian or the healer. Right, these various different parts of you that have been really personified in a lot of these other theories are then expressed and shine back out into the world. So these various parts of you, these other surfers, these novice surfers in the water, are taking direction at any point in time. And they're either under the leadership of survivor intelligence, so the lifeguard, or they're under the intelligence of the surfer. So they're either deferring to survivor intelligence or they're deferring to the pro surfer to get cues on, like, how's this wave looking? Like, should I take this wave, right? And the waves in this case are our plot lines. They're the events of our lives, right? Like, are the waters choppy? Is it smooth, right? And during times of distress, typically speaking, what happens is these various parts of ourselves defer back to the lifeguard stand because it was the intelligence source they have the most trust with, or they develop the most trust with, because that's essentially the OG narrator, right? Like I said before, we learn about our environment through our autonomic nervous system, through sensing and feeling our way through our outer world. it's only later on in our development that we become aware of the pro surfer, right? When we learn how to play, right? When we see children entering into these flow states where, they're coloring a picture of a giraffe or they're creating a fort, right? Like in this instance, they are co-creating with life. So in an ideal story, the autonomic nervous system or the lifeguard stand is deferred back to in times of distress, right? But quickly, these surfers transition their attention to the pro, right? It's like once they get the need met, the survival need met, they transition their attention to the pro. And as children, our survival needs are really met by our caregivers. So attuned caregivers, present caregivers. That's how they're really the segue. Our caregivers, or love, you could say, is really the segue of themes. So we take falls, we run to a caregiver, they help to soothe our nervous system through touch or through tone, right? All of these things are soothe our nervous system. And then we're able to transition themes from unmet need to met need. And then we can defer back to the pro surfer and start to ride the waves again. But if our needs go unmet and we aren't able to segue themes quickly enough, what ends up happening is we develop these core beliefs, these negative core beliefs. And so there are 3 negative core beliefs as far as I see them, which are I'm powerless, I'm not enough, and I am too much. So I'm powerless really means like I'm powerless to impact change over my life. I'm powerless when it comes to creatively participating in my life. I'm not enough means I'm not enough to get my needs met. And I'm too much means I am too much of X, Y, or Z to get my needs met. And so these negative core beliefs, they're usually developed I want to say, I think it's 7 and younger when we develop these, because that's when we have a sort of egocentric view of life. Again, we haven't fully developed that relationship with higher self yet. It's there, it's always present, but we haven't started to sort of really lean into it confidently and understand its cues, as well as we're familiar with our autonomic nervous system or survival intelligence. Okay, so when this happens, in essence, what is happening is we lose confidence from our childhood falls in higher self and in our faith that someone is coming, right? That we are okay, that we are safe. And we also lose faith in ourselves, right? We start to see ourselves as bad, flawed, unworthy, because we have such limited perception as a small person. Okay, so this is what happens. And this is really the birthplace of our psychological defense mechanisms, what I call our fall reactions, and the behaviors that we use to seek control over our environment and the circumstances in our life versus allowing ourselves to unfold into higher level thinking and higher self-guidance. So I'm going to do a post to give you some of these specifics of fall reactions. But when it comes to our fall mindsets, a few of these are hyper-responsibility, victim mentality, grandiosity, perfectionism. These are mindsets that we develop in order to get out ahead of pain or avoid pain. Okay, and then we have our chasing and bracing responses to life. So these are really the behaviors that we use in order to either ferociously like paddle to greener pastures, right? To get out ahead of pain, to seek a better feeling experience. And we see these, and I refer to these as chasing behaviors. We see chasing behaviors in addiction. We see it in sexual validation or just validation seeking behaviors. We see it in controlling behaviors, right? It's trying to feel better about a situation through seeking control, seeking a better feeling experience than the one that's presently unfolding in our here and now. And then we have our bracing behaviors. And these are really if we were to go back to the surfing analogy, how we turtle roll. So how we avoid life and seek to avoid the waves of life by checking out. So this could be binge eating. It could also be addictive behavior as well. And just avoidance of really any kind. So taking, minimal risks in life, being very passive in our communication style, being more submissive, right? These are just examples of sort of bracing behaviors. So I want to make a point. our fall reactions we're not at fault for them. And they actually did help us to survive childhood. Okay, like these responses to life helped us to get our survival needs met. The problem is they've outlived their helpfulness. And as adults, we're unable to get our ecstasy needs met because we're continuing to default to the same intelligence source, and we become addicted to these behaviors in order to get our needs met, and usually our needs for connection met. So if we want to live more creatively, if we want to access higher level thinking and to really allow our lives to dovetail with life itself and to start surfing the waves of life, then we need to figure out a way to identify when we're on the precipice of indulging in these survival responses and these behaviors. So aside from the fact that these responses block out higher self, right, what I just said before, and sort of keep us locked into survivorship, it also creates polarity with our internal parts, or this surf crew, which I mentioned earlier. And I'm going to give you an example of this that makes it clearer. Let's say you are out on a date with someone who is guarded. What does that look like? Maybe this person is just like hammering home questions and like interrogating you on this date, or maybe they really won't shred like an ounce of any personal information, or are curt. Maybe they're kind of negging. So what does it mean to be guarded? Well, if we look at the surfing analogy, what this looks like is there is a novice surfer who is actually blocking another surfer from riding a wave. So what do I mean by that? I mean that as a result of continuing to defer to survivor intelligence, our cast or our crew of surfers becomes fearful in one another, that their needs won't get met unless they assert will, power, and control over the waves, and they block other surfers from surfing them. Those that they feel are incongruent with the need that they're trying to get met. So in this example of someone who is on a date with someone who's guarded, the likelihood is the part of the person that the person who is guarded is protecting, the part of themselves they're protecting, is the vulnerable part of them. Maybe it was the part of them that got burnt in their last relationship, the lover in them, or maybe it's the inner child in them that really didn't get a lot of care and consideration or attunement as a child, right? And who felt vulnerable. And so this other novice surfer keeps blocking and cutting in front of the wave, like, you can't go here, right? So this deferment to survival intelligence creates this polarity, or I shouldn't say polarity, this sort of polarizing dynamic within this sort of surf culture. You know, in surf culture, there is something called localism. So people that are indigenous to certain spots will kind of they can get kind of aggressive with newcomers to that spot. And this sort of happens internally with us in our internal system when we continue to divert to survival intelligence and we continue to revert to these chasing, embracing behaviors. We actually start to split against ourselves, okay? And like I shared with previous videos, what makes higher self special is that it's the ultimate harmonizer. It works with all parts of us. So it works with all of the surfers to get our needs met so that we can relax and work together versus feeling like we're getting polarized feedback about what we should or should not be doing. So this whole internal localism happens as a result of parts of ourselves perceiving a wave, an event, a plot line in our life as similar to an old event or plot line where we experience a sense of powerlessness, not enough, or too muchness. And that's where this whole kind of incongruence comes in. We feel split against ourselves. We become distrustful of our ability to navigate the waves of life. And we certainly become distrustful of any feedback from higher self, who we have difficulty hearing when we're in sort of these survivor mentalities and we're behaving from a place of survivor intelligence. So this is sort of kind of like the origin story of how we come to block higher self intelligence, how we become distrustful of it, and we become distrustful of surrendering to the present moment and waiting on higher self-intelligence, why we start to try to control the waters and start to revert to the sort of chasing, embracing responses to life versus embracing life and turning towards life to resource us with all of our needs, both our survivor needs and our ecstasy needs. So in the next video, I'm going to introduce the concept of interoception, and we're going to start talking about, okay, so now we know that we've got blocks to higher self. We know we have some sort of background information on how to differentiate survivor intelligence from higher self guidance. So now how do we get out ahead of these sort of fall reactions to life and start to track our internal waters, start to track the energy of the waters within us so that we can start to surf again?